So first thing first, let's start implementing this check email feature where we will start checking on the server. As soon as we start entering a valid email, it should go and check on the server side whether that email is already used or not by the user for sign up. So that's what we'll do here. So we already have the view model where we have created two email required publisher and a valid publisher. So once we will need one more publisher called email server valid publisher, where it's going to check whether this is valid on the server or not. So it's going to use the already created email valid publisher, that is nothing but on the client whatever we entered, if that email format is valid or not, that's what this was validating. If it is true or not, it should start checking that. So if I say this email publisher is email valid publisher is valid, then I can make a request to the server and say, okay, now check whether this email is valid at your end or not, whether I can proceed with the sign up at least now. So that's what it will do. So this map is not correct yet, because this map is going to be now hitting the server. So this is going to be a flat map, because my server is going to return me an observable response, which I'll use again to validate. So that's why it's not a direct translation of my object into translation of my observable into a different observable. So here it's going to be converting from one observable to the another one. So I'll use a flat map here. So I need to inject in my view model. Now, do I have an init? Yes, I have. So here I need to inject the services which I'm going to consume. So first service is, so two things I will need here, because I've created a parser as well as a service. So let me just include that here. I have created auth API, which has these two definitions of these functions, check sign up and check email, and I also have auth service parsable. Okay, this is nothing but I need to implement this is what I'm implementing. So I'm just giving a definition of what my parser is. It just gives me the function. Again, just dependency injection using a protocol. That's what I've done here. So parsable and auth API. These two are what I'm going to pass, and then set those dependencies in my view model. View model, auth API, and auth service parser. So I can just say self.auth API is equal to auth API, and self.auth service parser is equal to auth service parser. That's done. So now it's going to give me error wherever I have instantiated my, okay, let me maybe filter and keep this. Don't give me error as yet, because I not have any implementation yet there. So here it starts to ask me things. First is auth service, so I can just pass auth service dot shared version, and then the parser. Parser is also a shared version. So auth service parser dot shared. Two things. So these are the two things I need to pass. Dependency inject to wherever it is being used, even here. So here maybe you can mock it. You don't need a real server, because it's more like a preview where you don't need the hitting to the real server. We can modify it if you want. So I have passed these two, sign up view model. So now let me go back here, email server validation. So what I'm doing here, I get, if my entered value of email is valid, then if it is filter is valid, then I start making a call to my server. So I can just say auth API in auth API dot check email $0 dot email. So this is going to return what? Check email is going to return me a future, which is again a publisher object. So that's what I'll be receiving here. Again, I can just use that to see whether that is valid or not now. So now I can map that response. Map, it's giving me a Boolean result there, right? I'll just show you that it's a Boolean. Check email, future is returning me a future Boolean value. So that's what I am. Again, I'm doing a flat map, converting my current observable to a new observable here, and then again mapping that response back here. This is my request. Response comes back in the same chain itself. I map it, and that $0 is going to be a Boolean result, and it's never going to error out. It's because I have set it as future bool never. It's never going to return an error, at least here. So it's always going to be true or false. That's what this $0 will be. It will be a true or false value. So I can even modify this and make it bool never. So that's what I have transformed here. Now it should not give me an error because I'm now mapping it to a Boolean value return type. So I managed to create a new server related publisher which can now be associated with my email field, which right now is bound with only 2 validations. It was bound with email valid publisher, and after that there was no validation. So if it is valid, it was not setting any error messages after that. So that's my new validation which I'm going to introduce here. Email server valid publisher dot receive that in the main thread, receive on main thread or run loop dot main. Then I can map that it's a Boolean value $0. If it is $0 empty, else email is already used, and then I can assign it to the same fields. It's the same things now. Assign it to email error field and show this email error field and show this new error message. So let's test it. Let's test this one. 11. So do we have the whole coupling right now? We have managed to do the whole thing. Email verification is now making the API call to the server. So do we have that server call ready yet? Let's go to auth service, check email. It receives the email value. It goes through the router, checks, validates the email, and that responds back saying, okay, whether it is this promise says whether it is false or true. If it is true, it goes back again, and I think it's well done right now. All that we need to do is to see whether we see that error message. That error message is not the end of it. We still have to validate whole of these publishers which we have defined to see whether in completeness whether we can make a sign up call yet or not. That's what the final approach will be after these validations are done. So sign up button enable disable is totally dependent on all these publishers which we have defined. So this is not yet disabled yet. we have to do that. So let's start by first thing check is to see whether our basic validations are working. Yeah, a modified color is missing. Now the next check is which email is not valid. As soon as I enter a valid email, it should validate on the server and give me a result. Is it even going to the server? It's a valid one. Email is not valid. It's not going to the server. Let's check that. So HTTP service auth service, what does it return? Keep up to places these promise. Okay, it's true, so it's not correctly bound yet to this field, because this is returning me a proper, now it should say false, hopefully. Yeah, so it's false because I already have that used in my server. So this is working fine. Check email is working fine. Wherever it is bound is not working fine. Okay, I don't need to map it here because anyway this is going to be a response type. So maybe let's check that. I'm just doing a flat map, passing this email. Is it coming in both places? Because we are firing two requests and there is no delay. So what we can do is, let's modify this. Valid publisher, filter, and then once this is done, we can map this email ID first. $0.email. Then get rid of this email. Next step is we apply a debounce where we wait for this server response 0.5 maybe. By applying debounce, we will make sure that as soon as we start typing, we don't hit the server. So it will wait until some characters are already entered and I stop typing response. And I also remove duplicates. That means if I say com and then enter make it as co, then it will not make any server request again. So maybe these things will make it work, because it is getting a response, multiple responses when we are typing fast. So maybe that's the reason it was not giving me proper responses. Wish@gmail.co. Now this is a valid email, but it's not yet used. Start giving me responses are fine. This is a valid one. As soon as I enter this, it should make it this is, I'm not sure what's going wrong here. Let me just check once. Interesting. So one of the findings I just did right now to identify why this is not working, it's pretty interesting, because now we have all these errors being bound with regular properties instead of published ones. So with the ones which I have completed already, the only difference that I have is even these are published ones. It's the only difference between what works with the version I have and what is not working right now. So with this change, we'll see something happening. So there's no change. It's just made it as published. No code, compilation errors, nothing. So now if I do it, gmail.co is a valid one because I don't think that is used yet. As soon as I make it com, server sends me saying email is already in use, so I cannot use this anymore. So that's the only change. Server validation was fine, binding was fine. Only thing that was missing was whatever I had defined as this. I had done very deliberately because I was feeling there was no need to actually bind it with a published property for at least that one, because the control itself was not asking for a, because I'm just using a text which is more like a label, and that's not accepting if I go and show you what I mean, if I go to my scene or text field, then error field is nothing but a text which accepts a regular string value instead of a bindable object. So I was just using a regular string value. So only assumption that I can make here is that the observable itself is, that's not even an observable. So it's not making sense to me, but this is what the solution is. Like if the values are changing, and because I was connecting to the server and getting that value and trying to set that as the error message, I had to use these even as published. So I need to evaluate why this did not work with a regular property and we had to use a publish. But solution is we need to use a publish property instead of a regular property. So that is done. Now we have a validation which is working fine. Just this observable is not valid. Let's say if I have user wish password test 1234 test 1234, so at least email is already used. Out of 4, 3 are valid, 1 is invalid, so sign up should not be enabled. So that's what we will right now work on. We'll create one more observable property called published property called enable sign up, and then bind that with this control. So this will depend on all these 4 observables. So let's work on that now. Interesting to understand this was the solution. Okay, so only way it did not work is that that observable at least got disposed or something. That's what I can think of. Otherwise there was no need for it to not show it. So let's create I'm gonna blindly use the exactly whatever I have implemented in my completed one where everything is working fine. Enable sign up, which is a type boolean, initial value being false. That means initially, because there will not be any value, sign up button will be disabled. So we can bind that with the sign up button. Let's go to this view. That's my button. So for enabling, I can directly say there is a property which I need to set called disabled, and it can be bound with ViewModel dot enable sign up. So it should be disabled when the toggle of it. So that's the logic. Now at least the button will be in a disabled state. You cannot make any request using that now. Also, let's apply some color based on change the background color. Right now it is all black. We can make it some gray based on this value. Enable sign up. Enable sign up, that means it becomes black, otherwise it will be color.gray or something. Gray. So that's a binding which we are doing right now. Let's just run see. At least it should be disabled at this point. Yeah, it's disabled, right? So we'll start making this enabled. We don't have any logic to make it enabled yet, so it will still be disabled state, in a disabled state, because we have already set it to false. That's why it is not reflecting here. So how do we make this enable using all the other publishers which we have defined? Let's do that. Let's create a publisher here now. Hope that's what I have done in my completed one. I can now do something called combine all publishers. So whatever I'm going to do is I'm going to use all these four publishers, not all the four, but at least the last publisher, because only once the first publishers becomes valid, let's say in this case an email required publisher is valid, that's when the email valid publisher is triggered, and once this is valid is when email server valid publisher is triggered. So once this final one is valid, at least out of the four, email validation is becoming a valid one. So similarly, we need to capture the last publisher corresponding to a control and then use that in the combine latest. So we can call publishers dot combine latest. It's funny that they have given functions like these instead of making it like accepting how many number of publishers that we can pass. So I can pass for username, it will be username required publisher, because that's only publisher we had depended on. Username equal valid publisher, just to validate username if that is valid. Then we have the password email. We should be using the server one because that is the last validation which we do. Then the third one is the password valid publisher, and fourth being password equal publisher. So these are the ones which are critical to make the sign up button enable. So password username required field, email server validation, password rule validation, and finally password confirm password equals password. That last validation, that has to be matching, that has to also match. So use these four to create an observer. Let's map these four and then create a response observable for this, which we will use to assign the value for enable sign up. So these are using username, email, password, confirm. Maybe I'll just call these as the four parameters which needs to be valid. So these are all returning. Maybe I can call this is valid as, maybe that's not even needed because these are all returning boolean. So I can just directly say if username and email and password and confirm password all are true, only then enable the button. It's very simple. So receive this on the run loop.main and then assign to my enable sign up property which I have defined. Then cancelable system store in cancelable back final thing. So pretty simple, right? You have these combining all these required or combining the relevant publishers specific to each field which we have defined, and then map in, then use that to create another observable or a publisher which you can assign to enable sign up. So hope this is going to work, not going to give me any headache again. So let's see, let's make everything valid and see whether it's enabling the sign up button. So now it's disabled because we initially set it as false. Let's set the user, first one is valid, email, it's already a bad value, so let's keep that. Password test test 1 2 3 4 test 1 2 3 4, 3 out of 4 are valid. So now it is enabled, so it'll start getting those click sign up click. As soon as you make something invalid, that button gets disabled, so you can't do any more action on that. This is pretty much what how you bind your observable publishers to make some control enable or disable. This is also working. So now we are at the final step where we will trigger this API call to sign up and then get that sign up response, which is pretty much very simple right now after having known how to work with these things. So let's do that. Sign up view. I don't have any action here. This is where it's going to happen, not this. Our action is here. So let's do one thing. We don't need this here, sign up clicked. Instead, we can move that action to our view model. So we are delegating that to the view model and just saying function create a function here, sign up, and I don't need to pass anything to view model because view model already knows which are the valid values which needs to be sent to the server for validation or for signing up. So I just create a sign up function here, and then maybe I can just go here to the view and say view model dot sign up. That's it. Action is defined now. It should not give me any error, and it should start giving me the create as an extension, maybe sign up view model function sign up, clearly keeping it separate. Sign up function, all that I need to do here is, anyway, this button is only going to get enabled if the validations are valid. Validations are fine, all those 4 fields. So once that is done, I can just maybe call, I already have the auth API, I can just call sign up and pass each values which I already know, like view model already has email, sorry, username, email, password. That's it. And this is again an observer, so it is going to return me some value because this is a function which is a future function. So I can expect a response promise from this saying an error or a success. So I already can do something like this and then do a flat map and then transform my response to this. How I have done, I need to see that once. Sign up and then flat map, and I already know, I have already defined a parser, auth service parser in, so I can use this response to parse it, parse sign up response, status code $0 dot status code and $0 dot data. This is what this function sign up is responding with, which I'll use to parse my response here, and then I can map it, the result is going to be of type auth result. So I know that is my result. Map transform to auth result. Let me just call that as result in switch result. And add those 2 things. I don't need this unknown type. It can be success or failure. Break. Let me just keep that break for the time being. Again, did I miss a function ending somewhere? I guess again here. here. Okay, so auth response, sign up response is coming back through this, then parsing happens, and then I map that parse response, get those value or error here. So I don't really need this because sign up is going to return me a token. I'm not interested in that token. If it is success, I'll just say okay, I'm fine with that success. I might just say this validation or sign up is successful. So for showing the sign up, I'm going to add one more control over here. It's going to look like this. It's pretty straightforward. And I'm going to associate that to, maybe I can just write text resume return, remove the things which are not needed for the time being. Try again. Failure. So it's gonna come somewhere here as a message. Just gonna add some padding to it. Okay, that's enough. And this is my success or failure for sign up message is going to come here. So I'm going to bind that, even that, to the view model. So let me create view model for that. Sign up view. Let me call that as a status view model. I'm just going to grab that directly from my existing implementation. Status view model. It's nothing but a title and color with the color codes being passed to that. It's going to give me the title and the color which I need to show for success or failure. And then I'm going to create a property over here in my sign up view model to show the initial value, success status view model with title and success value being success. So that's my status view model, which I'm going to bind to my text view. So instead of this, I'm going to say my view model dot status view model dot title. That's bound. It's directly going to take that value. Also, I'm going to apply I guess a foreground color dot foreground color, which is going to come from that view model itself. View model dot status view model dot color dot color, because that's it's my custom implementation, so it's going to take that value from this should have disappeared. That's okay. So it's going to take whatever value I'm going to send as well as the color which I'm going to pass when the success or failure happens. So that's done now. Let me go back to my view controller, view model. The view controller is no more existing. Good news. So we have this view. So what should happen? So enable sign up we have done, and what should happen on sign up? So on success, what should we do? On failure, what should we do? So this code is like on sign up, we are making the API request, doing the passing of the response, and then after the passing, we are using that value to see whether that sign up is successful or not. So let me do that. What have I done? Okay, so on success, I'm gonna return a view model status view model status view model. Pass the title. Let me call it as sign up is successful. Color code being color codes dot success value. That's what I'm gonna pass. And if it is a failure, I'm gonna say sign up failed simply. And I'll say color codes dot failure. That's not the end of it, because this is just returning me view models. Return status view model. Failure case should be okay. So maybe I can just say it should return a status view model. Okay, that's good. Error, not capturing even that. Success and failure, I'm just ignoring those messages which are coming from the server. So that's done. Now I can receive this value on the run loop.main and then say if there is an error condition. Let's say I receive an error from, like, I was throwing some error, then I also need to send that because this is using more like this is responding with even with an error. So if an error comes, I need to replace that error with something meaningful like this view model again. So I'll just use the same thing, view model with this. Maybe I don't need this if that is the case. Yeah, now it's able to identify what is a type. So error anyway is getting replaced with this. And then now I can use this to assign to my key which I have defined. Have I defined something? Okay, we have already defined it, like it's called status view model itself. That is something we defined here with initial values. So that's where I will assign it on self. Finally, store cancelable back. Guess pretty much looking pretty now. All over the place. Let's indent it once. Okay, neat. Hope this should work. So as soon as sign up happens, it can succeed or fail, and then once it succeeds, we send that color and the title to the UI to update itself. I guess that should be the last step in our sign up feature. Let's do that. And maybe let's try that. Sign up, on button click, sign up happens, and then we parse it, get that response, set it to a view model, and then send that back to the place where it needs to be bound. Let's check once this text is bound, view model color is applied here, status would be updated here. And then once that happens, maybe we can clear those fields. So that's where we can use something called as handle events. Like once an event is triggered, we can just use receive output. As soon as you get a result, we can handle some of the things in this at this point. So receive output underscore in, and then we can say username, so weak self, we're going to reset everything. Self dot username is equal to empty, self dot pass, self dot email equal to empty, self dot password equal to empty, self dot confirm password equals to empty. That's also done. So that's the last step. Maybe on whatever we need to do on the sign up button, like making it transition to a different state and all, maybe I can make it as a smaller tutorial and then bring it in the next episode as a smaller one. This already itself is like too big an episode, so let's capture that in the next one. Wish 123 wish @gmail or email.com is already used. It's not used. Good. Then password is test1234, test1234. Let's do this. The final sign up step, it should show me these status message here. Sign up is successful and everything is reset. Pretty decent, right? So like I said, as soon as we hit the sign up, maybe we can block the another click and then make that into a different animation and then make it work in a different way. We can do in the next episode. But at least I'm done with this part of this tutorial, taking you through the whole creation of the sign up screen, binding with view models, attaching your services with combined futures and everything, and then making that final sign up happen. Before that, we also checked how you can validate an email using the server response, all that thing. And we also faced some hurdles in between where some things were not working because I had deviated from the exact way I had done it in the completed project. So even I could identify there can be problems which can happen when we don't set something in a specific way, which I don't have an answer to yet, because I don't know why a regular string did not work, and then when we made it as a published string, it started working. So that is something I'll come back to you through a separate description, maybe along with something I can combine along with this sign up button enabling state handling on the view model to transition and animate it into it, show it in a different way. So I guess this is the last episode. I was trying to make this as the last episode for this year, but then it overflowed into the new year. So maybe this is my first episode for the new year, and maybe the last episode for the 2019. So 2020 you can welcome with this episode. So I guess I don't subscribe to my channel and keep subscribed for to 2020 even. And then there are new things coming up pretty soon, where we have not even touched upon how to transition to a different screen, pass values between screens. All those things are still coming up, so keep watching this space again. So until the next episode, it's bye from me and happy new year once again.